Hello, I'm Steph from My Driver Classic, and today I'm having a rather marvellous day because I'm down at the Standard Motor Club Rally and they've let me borrow a few cars. And my first pick for this weekend is this Standard 10 Companion. It's something that I've never actually seen out in the wild on the roads, and I thought, what better place to try it than here today? So we're going to take this out today. If you've never seen one either, you're in for a treat because we're going to show you all around the outside, show you in the back, under the bonnet, all the interior, and we're even going to take you through a walk through the controls, and best of all, we're even being trusted to take her out for a test drive. So come with me and we'll explore the Standard 10 Companion. This Standard Companion Estate from 1957 is based on the Standard 10 and was introduced in 1954. The Companion might be lesser spotted than, say, the 8 or the 10 at a classic car show and even this rally today, but they actually did outlive both the 8 and the 10, with the 8 and 10 production ending in 1959. However, the Companion marched solidly on until 1961 when it was replaced by the Herald Estate. Now, first of all, let's talk about capacity of this, because if you were stepping up from your faithful Standard 10, what could you expect to gain? Because remember, the people that were buying these were looking at it perhaps with a more commercial or harder user end in mind. Well, the low capacity of the car, first of all, is described in hundredweights, but for a lot of people, they can't really imagine what that is. So I wanted to give that to you at home in simpler terms to perhaps show off the capability of the vehicle just a little bit better. So the car was said with 4 passengers, so that's the back seats folded up, to have luggage carrying capacity of 112 pounds, which roughly works out at 50 kilos. And with those back seats folded down to maximise load capacity, it was said to take 560 pounds, which is roughly around 254 kilos. Now, in 1956, Farmers Weekly tested the vehicle because farmers were the kind of people that were going to be buying these, and they wanted to see if it was suitable for life on a farm. Now remember, they're looking at farmer, farmer's wife, farmer's family as well. It's not just a painter or decorator who's going to shove the seats down and fill it full of stuff. And so they tested it with back seats up, back seats down, and you get some really interesting figures. So they reckoned with the back seats up, you could load in 6 30-dozen egg boxes, or 5 empty milk churns, and by lowering the seats they got in an impressive 11 milk churns. Now this might seem utterly redundant today and for many people quite bizarre, but for many rural families of the 50s, and my family would have been the kind of people that would have looked at this because I'm from a farming family, this would have made the vehicle an attractive prospect, because for the farmer they can look and say, well, this is how it pairs up against something like a Land Rover, which maybe is not something which is quite what they need, or someone who's got a small holding, or someone that's maybe got something a little bit smaller in terms of what they're doing. They're not going to need such an off-road vehicle. This is a really great plan B. Now, I imagine that it was probably pretty slow at full load, but a lot of these vehicles were, and this wasn't unusual. If you look at things like Morris Minors or Austins that are also getting loaded up, they're also not going very fast either. So realistically, that's not something that we're going to pull apart in this review. Now, there were no additional engine options for someone who perhaps needed to operate at full load all the time and go a little bit faster, and your only engine option on this was the overhead valve 948cc engine, which I think they also use in the Standard 10. Now, the 948 engine is paired with a 4 forward speed box, again exactly like you're getting in that 10, and again with no synchron first. And another thing which is pretty usual for the era, so there's no complaints or things to pull apart there. There was also the option to add overdrive at an additional cost, but this hasn't been fitted to this vehicle. Now, there is another option for the transmission, and one which I've never seen in person, so I can't tell you what it's like, and that's the stand drive 2-pedal option. Now, I believe with the limited information online and what I've read in various bits of literature, that this is some sort of early transmission option. However, always a massive beware on stuff like this in today's world, because when you buy into something like this and you go, oh, it's an automatic, it's a bit different, they're rare, And it also means that they're going to be a pest to find parts for when things go wrong. So I always avoid stuff like that if I'm buying a classic vehicle. And if you're watching this and buying your first classic vehicle, always go for the more usual option because you'll thank yourself later. Anyway, you know what else is optional on these? The heater. But I am not surprised because again, just like no synchro, just like one engine option, all of this is very usual for a vehicle of this era, and especially one which might be used commercially, because all the frugality keeps costs low and makes it easy for people to buy into the new vehicle. However, despite life in the slow lane, it does very well on fuel economy, and you can expect 57 miles per gallon at best. So that's like on your long runs at a consistent speed without lots of stopping and starting, no real town traffic. But even around town and with varying speeds, you can expect low 40s in your miles per gallon. Now, I got this from the sales brochure and I thought, what's that going to be like when it's fully loaded up? However, the aforementioned Farmers Weekly review came to my rescue because they also looked at the MPG when it was fully laden, and they described it as coming in at a fraction under 40 miles per gallon, which again is not to be sniffed at because it's better than a Morris Minor without any load in it. So for me, that is great. And for somebody who's coming out of that petrol rationing era, because petrol's still rationed in that early 50s mark, all of this is still fresh in people's minds. Now, the suspension to accompany all of this is coil springs at front, giving independent front suspension, and semi-elliptic springs at the rear. The brakes are hydraulic, and you've got 2 leading shoe at front and leading and trailing shoe for rear. So again, pretty much as you'd expect. Farmers Weekly, which is clearly my favourite review on this one, described them as excellent and gave them an efficiency rating of, I think it was 85 or 83% when stopping at 30 miles per hour. Today, the Companion is a very rare thing indeed. It was always well thought of at the time of launch, and for the reviews that are still out there, it is spoken of quite highly, and it's well received, and it's even well received in today's classic car world, where you always see them greeted with a smile. Well, when you see them, because sadly, because of the workhorse capacity of the car, many of them have just been used, abused, and put through their paces, and sadly no longer exist today, which means that today's test is rather special. As we come inside here, I want to bring your attention to something that Standard used when they were talking about this car. They described it as practical simplicity meets attractive design, and the idea was that the end user wasn't overloaded with lots of stuff. It was as basic as it could be to keep the price as low as possible. However, if you've ever been in an 8, you'll notice that there are a few cheeky upgrades when you come into that 10 and of course your Companion design. Things like wind down windows, which are a rather nice thing to be having, especially on a hot day. But coming back inside here, let me show you what we've got inside this Companion. First of all, you have got this space here. Now, I was talking to you about loads and space and everything else in between when we were walking around, but Standard also considered this space as well, and they kept this blank deliberately because the idea is the end user of one of these was going to be somebody who wasn't just pootling around going on a leisurely drive from A to B. It was somebody who was using the vehicle as a workhorse, needed as much space as possible, and the thing would just be overloaded with stuff. So they thought, right, we'll leave that all blank. Although it's blank on the 8 and the 10, it continues on in here because they just think, well, the end user is going to appreciate that. Now, talking about that simplicity, that continues down into our controls. Although there's a couple of things that I need to tell you as we go along. So first of all, you've got your starter, and I'm going to show you when we start this today. It's probably not going to start how you think it starts. Now, coming over from here, this makes me so cross. This is the light switch for the car. Now, you're going to say to me, but Steph, where is the light switch? Well, this car went on show at the NEC and somebody pinched this, which is one of the scummiest things that you can do. And it makes me so cross for the owner because it's something that is so hard to find. And it's like, what are you doing? It's horrible. It's not right. Anyway, coming across from there, you've got your key, you've got your choke. No, I can't remember which one of these two is for the heater. One is for the heater and one is for the choke. And I said, why do they both say choke? And it's because we talk about the rarity of these small little bits and pieces. The heater pull was missing, and so just a choke one was available, and that's what's been popped on. You've also got your wipers there as well, and that are all your controls just there. Coming up from here, this is your heater temperature control, so it just takes it simply from hot to cold. You can't control the direction of the heat, you've got it on there. And then coming in front of you, that simplicity continues, because here you've got your speedo, which runs up to, what's that, 85 miles per hour. Although looking at the brochures for the time, and I had a look at one from 1960, because these are so few and far between, there aren't a million brochures available. Now the 1960 brochure promised that you would get 70 miles per hour, so that's a rather ambitious target there of 85, but they say the minor only goes up to 74, and I can tell you it goes up higher. Coming down from there, you've got your fuel gauge, and you've got oil warning light, and you've got ignition warning light as well. And that is everything you're working with. And you've also got your indicator stalk. Now, the other thing that I should point out as well is you've got another cubby hole just here. Again, it's that idea that we're giving that end user lots of space to store all their stuff. And you've also got this two-spoke steering wheel. Now, the two-spoke was a deliberate choice. And the idea is that when the end user, the customer or the driver, was in the vehicle and they were looking straight forward, wherever that wheel was, they were able to see this main speedo. And that, my friends at home, is everything we're playing with today. Now, a couple of other bits. You may notice the outside colour of the car. I know that the colours changed, so when I was looking at this 60 brochure, it didn't match the colour specs for this particular year, and this particular car is lavender grey. Now, you might be looking at the car and saying, but Steph, when I think of lavender, I think of purple. And I was talking to the owner, Sean, and he said his wife made an astute observation. And she said, well, they must be thinking of the lavender bush in winter, because when the lavender bush is in winter, it's the same grey as this. So just a little bit of trivia for you there. You might also be looking at the seats and the interior and thinking, blimey, that's held up well. Well, it has been retrimmed, but really sympathetically to match how the original Vinide would have looked. It's now been trimmed in leather, but it just follows the same colour spec, the same trim pattern as the original Vinide would have. And I think for someone who doesn't like retrimmed cars, I'm really taken by this. I think they've done a beautiful job on it. The stitching is so neat, it's so even, and it's wearing really well. And that is what a quality retrim job does. It not only lasts, but really sells the car in a sympathetic way. It looks lovely. Now, you're probably wondering what it sounds like. Well, remember, we've got that 948cc engine, 37 brake horsepower that I was talking to you about, and I'm now going to show you how we start it. And it's not going to be how you think, because we are starting it with a piece of twine. You might be wondering why Sean hasn't fixed that before the rally. But here's the thing. Sean didn't set out for the rally like this. It broke en route. And I said to him, that's just brilliant, because he's driven all the way from Leicestershire down to Winchester, and he just said, right, he said, well, it wasn't going to stop me coming to the rally, so he fashioned up this bit of twine and said, show me how to use it, and said, just start it like that. So I'll show you how we go. And I've been told not to give her too much throttle when we start her up, because it can throw her off somewhat. So I haven't got this right every time, to be fully transparent with you all, but you have to be quite forthright with the motion. Hold on. Oh, there we go. Give her a little blip for you. It sounds a really healthy little engine. And I'm just going to attach this string once again. You might get to see the wipers in motion today, because you might have already guessed from the state of my hairdo today that the weather has been absolutely atrocious. We've timed it quite well here. Something that's throwing me somewhat is the steering. So it's 4 forward gears, no synchro on first. And when I said to Sean, what's the gear pattern? And he said, very vague. You've just got to keep going and work it out. So that's second. So I reckon that's first. No, it's not. I like to be honest with you all and show you what it's really like. Try that. Probably should have had a bit of a practice. Right, there we go. There we go. Oh, that's nice. A modern car isn't being aggressive for once. Thank you. And that, my friends at home, is us up into fourth gear. Now I might drop to third as we come round. You know what? It's funny. It was really difficult to find first gear, but now that we're out and about, it's becoming more and more natural where I find the gears. So maybe it's not as dire as Sean said it might be for me. Now there is quite a lot of noise in the cabin, so I'm just going to do up those windows for you. Now as we cruise down, one of the things that strikes me is the positioning of the steering wheel. It feels quite low down and it's actually brushing my leg as I drive, which is a slightly strange sensation. I'd like it to be up higher by another, 3-4 inches? Even 2 would just give me the space I need. Oh! These brakes have been adjusted well. Little observation for you all. I thought just as much. I thought I'd be able to set off in second there. That's us into third and then bring us down into fourth. Now we are on national speed limit, so I'll try and get a little bit of speed out of her. Do you know, she cruises along so beautifully. Lovely car to drive. Now quite often when you get in vans of this vintage, you tend to find that the back windows are so small that you can't see out of them properly. But those back windows are so fairly sized that you can see all around you because you've got these ginormous windows. You can see through the back as well. It is just such an easy little thing to drive. However, it's a lot louder inside than I thought it might be. I thought it might be a wee bit quieter. But it's a very small complaint because you can sort all of that sort of stuff out with sound deadening if it really bothers you that much. Now, as we cruise along, I got told that she'd be happy sitting at around 50 miles per hour. And when you borrow other people's cars, you like to be nice and conservative and not take it too far. Now, I'm really not thrashing her at all. I'm just cruising along leisurely and she's nearly up to 40 miles per hour. And that feels quite a comfortable natural speed for us to be sitting at. I'm not going to brag her just to show that she can do those numbers. Now, a lot of people look at stuff at this age and they think it's quite difficult to live with. But this is that same era where people would buy into, you know, your Morris Minors and stuff like that. They drive all of that. 50s and 60s cars are a lot more usable than people think. And as you can see, we're not having to push our hard at all to sit at 40 miles per hour, which means that it's a car that you can use round and about. And I was telling you about those MPG numbers when we were looking round her, and they're so, I think, so attractive when you look at older cars, because some older cars you're struggling to hit kind of that 30, whereas with this, a promise of low 40s at the very worst feels to me like quite a budget-friendly motor that you can handle. And there's so much room in that engine bay that you can really get to everything. So it means that maintenance as well just isn't a chore. Now, I'm not pushing her at all, and she's naturally rising up towards that 50 mark, which says to me that if I was to put my foot down somewhat, maybe I would get that 50, but it's happy sitting at this speed, and I don't think we need to push her any further. Now, the one thing I will say is that another thing that puts people off buying something sometimes they worry about things like, how am I going to manage in terms of finding out how to fix stuff or find the parts that I need? Well, first of all, I'm at the Standard Motor Club rally, so that should tell you a lot. There is a club. And number two, they are one of the most fantastically supportive and active clubs out there. Even though it's a marque that hasn't been on the market for decades, the support of the club, the camaraderie, the friendliness, the willingness of people to help you find stuff out, help you locate bits and pieces, in my opinion, is unrivaled. For a club of its size and a club of its era, it's really, really strong. So if something like that was a barrier for you, don't be put off. You can join the club and get that support that you need. They're really nice people as well. I was saying before, wasn't I, when I did another Standard video, I think it was the Standard 8, that I've never met a Standard owner and I haven't walked away and thought, you're a really nice person. They're all really good people. So it's a lovely club to get involved with, especially if you're someone who's maybe not bought a classic before and you want to go for something of this era, but don't want to go for something that everybody else has got, like a Morris Minor, which I completely respect, by the way, because whenever you go to a show, there's always a Morris Minor. Now, I was talking about that gear change at the start of the video, and I said, oh, I've been warned by Sean that it was very much, you've got to feel around and find those gears. But I don't think it's that bad. It's certainly not as precise as something like an Anglia or an earlier Morris Minor. But once you get into the swing of things and you realise where the gears are and you get a bit of a natural affinity with it, it becomes second nature. I mean, I'm cruising along now and I really haven't found it that hard at all. It's not that difficult. It's just a case of getting used to the vehicle in hand. Now, I'm trying to think what else I need to tell you about this drive, because it's just a perfectly pleasurable little vehicle to cruise along in. The steering is lovely and light. I'm certainly not having to strain myself. The brakes, I don't know if they're particularly well adjusted, but they are very firm and prompt at pulling the car up to a stop. Comparable with everything else of its age. They don't particularly stand out to me as overly brilliant or overly bad. They would say upper middle performance on those, really adequate once you've got your head around how drum brakes work and leaving those stopping distances. I do wish that this steering wheel wouldn't touch the top of my leg, but once you are kind of 5 minutes into that driving experience, you forget it's even there. I'm just really enjoying myself. And if you're looking for quite a practical classic that you can load up with all your stuff, or you have a little business and you like something that you can do small runs in, this is certainly something that you should consider, because not only have you got all that room in the back, it's easy enough to drive, it's got a fantastic turning circle on it. I'm going to have to do a bit of reading afterwards and try and find out what the precise turning circle is. But I had to do a turn in the road earlier and I didn't have to do a 3-point turn or anything like that. It just turned so smoothly, slow, sleekly, and I thought that is just bob on. It's wonderful. I've really enjoyed taking out this little tank companion. It's a cracking little thing to drive. As you can see here, it's sprightly enough, it's cruising along without straining itself. You've got plenty of visibility, which brings in lots of light into the cabin. So even though the space is a little bit more compact than, say, that Vanguard that we took out from David last year, because you've got that light coming in and it's a light dash and it's a light coloured car, it doesn't feel cramped at all inside. Now the seats as well, I should probably mention those. Where they are and where they've been positioned, you can see to the end of the bonnet with ease. They are lovely and comfortable to sit on, and it's just all round a pleasurable motoring experience. There's not really much apart from a more precise gear change that you could ask for. So that's it from me today. We're still at the Standard Motor Club rally. I've been promised that we can borrow some other bits and pieces, so make sure you come back next weekend and see what else we've managed to pitch the keys to. But until then, take care and drive safely.